The first time Princess Queen Eloria of the Varelian Concordance spoke the human's name aloud, the high-throned chamber fell into an uneasy silence. Not because the name was strange. Elias Ward sounded plain, almost insignificant, but because of the tone in which she said it. Eloria was not known for fear, nor exaggeration. She had ruled 3 systems, quelled 2 civil schisms, and negotiated peace with species that communicated only through chemical burns on stone. Yet when she addressed the ruling triarchs that day, her crest dimmed to a warning hue, and her wings, delicate, crystalline things grown from royal gene rights, folded tight against her back. "The human is not like the others," she said. "And if we continue to treat him as we have treated every other emissary from that death world, we will condemn ourselves." The triarchs exchanged glances. One of them clicked his mandibles in faint amusement. "Princess Queen," Triarch Voss replied, his voice amplified by the chamber's resonance field, "humans have been part of the Concordance for 30 cycles. They're volatile, yes. Creative. Occasionally troublesome. But they bleed, they bargain, and they die like all others." Eloria met his compound eyes without blinking. "This one," she said quietly, "does not. The Deathworlder arrival." Elias Ward arrived on Viral Prime, without ceremony. No escort fleet. No honor procession. Just a single, scarred diplomatic cutter bearing the insignia of the Terran Union, landing on the obsidian platform beneath the floating capital spires. From the observation balcony, Eloria watched him disembark. He was smaller than most of the concordant species, compact, dense, wrapped in a dark environmental coat despite the tempered air. His hair was prematurely silvered at the temples. His gait was relaxed, almost casual, as if he were stepping into a familiar space rather than the seat of galactic power. But it was his eyes that caught her attention. They did not roam. They did not dart. They fixed, measured, and remembered. Eloria felt an old, instinctive shiver ripple through her wings. Predator. Not in the obvious way, no bared fangs, no aggressive posture, but in the deeper sense. The kind of being that had survived not by dominance, but by adaptation, by learning, by enduring. "Why send him alone?" she murmured. Her aide, Scholar Adjunct Tyrell, flicked her sensory tendrils. Terran Union records indicate he requested minimal presence. Claims large entourages complicate honesty. Eloria's crest dimmed further. Honesty, she had learned, was the most dangerous weapon humans possessed. 2. A history of misunderstanding. The Concordants had made the same mistake with humans again and again. They saw a species from a high-gravity, predator-rich death world and assumed brute force. They prepared for violence, countered aggression, imposed restrictions. But humans were not conquerors by nature. They were survivors. They negotiated because it was cheaper than war. They smiled because it disarmed enemies. They learned alien languages not to dominate but to understand weaknesses, customs, and leverage. Most troubling of all, they bonded. Where other species maintained rigid hierarchies and emotional distance, humans formed connections with alarming speed. Crewmates became family. Allies became kin. Insults were remembered for generations. And Elias Ward, according to intelligence briefings Eloria had studied in secret, had lost his family to a Concordant-sanctioned resource pacification on the frontier moon Halcyon 9. Official reports labeled it collateral damage. Human records called it a massacre. When Eloria learned Elias had personally requested assignment to Viral Prime, the heart of the Concordance, she understood immediately. This was not diplomacy. It was reckoning. 3. First words, first wounds. Their first meeting took place not in the throne chamber, but in the Garden of Silent Stars, a neutral ground reserved for sensitive negotiations. Eloria dismissed most of her guard. Elias noticed. That's either very brave, he said, seating himself across from her at the floating stone table, or very confident. Which do you prefer? Eloria asked. Elias smiled faintly. It didn't reach his eyes. Depends on the outcome. They spoke for hours. About trade routes. About border tensions. About mining rights and shared research initiatives. Elias was polite, incisive, and devastatingly well-prepared. He quoted Concordance law more accurately than some Triarch clerks. He referenced incidents buried in sealed archives. Finally, Eloria leaned forward. You did not come here for trade, she said. No, Elias agreed. Then speak plainly. He met her gaze fully now. You killed my people, he said, without heat or accusation. Not by malice, by indifference. And you will do it again, unless something changes. Eloria felt the truth of it resonate painfully within her core. What do you want? She asked. Elias folded his hands. Accountability, he said. And a future where humans aren't treated as expendable variables in your equations. And if the Triarchs refuse, his smile faded entirely. Then I stop asking. 4. The warning ignored. Eloria brought her concerns to the throne. She spoke of Elias's precision, his restraint, his patience. He is waiting, she told them, not for permission, for proof that we are incapable of change. Triarch Voss dismissed her again. Empty threats, he said. Humans' posture. They lack the industrial capacity to challenge us directly. Eloria's wings flared in alarm. They don't need to challenge us, she said. They only need to endure us. The Triarchs laughed. And somewhere in the depths of the Concordance's data networks, Elias Ward began to move. The quiet collapse. The first disruption was minor. A trade algorithm rerouted shipping lanes inefficiently, costing several corporations a fraction of a % in profit. Analysts blamed a software error. Then came a delay in medical nanite shipments to a border sector. Bureaucratic oversight, they said. Communication relays began to desynchronize by microseconds, enough to corrupt long-range coordination. Energy grids experienced inexplicable load imbalances. Nothing catastrophic. Nothing traceable. Until patterns emerged. Eloria saw them first. They are not attacks, she whispered, staring at cascading reports. They are lessons. Elias was demonstrating the Concordance's dependence on systems humans had helped design. Over decades, humans had embedded themselves into logistics, engineering, and data infrastructure, not out of conquest, but cooperation. Now Elias was showing what happened when cooperation withdrew its goodwill. When confronted, Elias did not deny it. I'm not harming anyone, he said calmly. I'm letting your systems behave exactly as designed, without human correction. The Triarchs demanded his arrest. Eloria stood between them and him. If you imprison him, she said, you prove his point. 6. The breaking point. The crisis came on a cycle of twin eclipses. A mining station on the edge of Concordance space suffered a reactor instability. Normally, human engineers would have been dispatched immediately. This time, none came. The station evacuated successfully, but the ore shipments it supplied accounted for nearly 12% of the Concordance's energy lattice. Power shortages rippled inward. Defense grids dimmed. Civil unrest flared. For the first time in centuries, the Concordance felt vulnerable. The Triarchs summoned Elias to the throne in chains. Eloria watched, heart heavy, as he stood before them, unbowed. You've made your point, Triarch Voss snapped. Release your grip on our systems. Elias looked around the chamber. I don't control your systems, he said. You do. I simply stopped holding them together for you. Silence followed. Then Eloria stepped forward. He warned us, she said softly. I warned you. 7. Choice of a queen. In a move that stunned the Concordance, Eloria invoked an ancient royal prerogative. She dissolved the Triarch Council. Temporarily, she claimed, but everyone knew the truth. The Concordance needed reform, and it needed it now. She negotiated directly with Elias. Public accountability for Halcyon 9. Reparations. Human representation in strategic decision-making. Binding safeguards against unilateral pacification actions. In return, Elias restored human cooperation. Systems stabilized within days. Trade resumed. The Concordance breathed again. When it was over, Eloria met Elias one last time in the garden. You could have destroyed us, she said. Yes, Elias replied. But then we'd just be another horror story you tell your hatchlings. He stood, preparing to leave. What will you tell yours? She asked. Elias paused. That someone finally listened. 8. The legend takes root. Centuries later, Concordant scholars would argue whether Elias Ward was a hero or a threat. Human historians would call him a diplomat. Eloria, in her private chronicles, used a different word, mirror, because through him, the Concordance had been forced to see itself clearly for the first time. And that, she believed, was why humans were not like the others. They did not conquer thrones. They taught them how easily they could fall and offered a chance to stand differently. If the warning was heeded, Elias Ward did not leave Viral Prime immediately. That alone unsettled the Concordance. Humans were known for abrupt departures, strike, resolve, vanish. But Elias remained, moving through administrative corridors and data vaults with calm purpose, advising where asked and observing where not. He refused ceremonial honors. He declined security escorts. Instead, he requested access. Access to archives sealed since the founding accords. Access to border arbitration records. Access to casualty projections that had never been shared with the public. Eloria granted it all. Some among the remaining ministers whispered that the Princess Queen had surrendered sovereignty. Others feared something worse, that she had invited a predator to study the anatomy of their empire from the inside. Eloria heard every whisper. She ignored them, because she had begun to understand the deeper danger Elias represented. He was not dismantling the Concordance. He was teaching it to see the cost of its own convenience. 9. A human way of remembering. On the 30th cycle after the Halcyon 9 ruling was formally overturned, Elias requested a private audience. Not in the throne chamber. At the memorial. The Concordance had never maintained memorials in the human sense. Loss was recorded, categorized, and archived, efficient, emotionless, complete. But Elias had insisted. So now, on a floating platform above the capital's inner sea, names glowed in soft light. Not numbers. Not designations.
Names. Human.
Virelian.
Kelf.
Species from 6 systems whose deaths had once been written off as acceptable variants. Eloria watched Elias stand silently before the projection. You didn't have to do this, she said. Yes, he replied, voice low. You did. She stepped closer. Will it ever be enough? Elias considered the question. No, he said honestly. But it's a start. He turned to her then, studying her with that unsettling precision. You dismantled the Triarchs knowing it might cost you the throne. I am still queen, Eloria said. For now, Elias agreed. But humans don't measure leadership by how long you rule. We measure it by what you're willing to lose. Eloria felt the weight of that truth settle into her core. X, the uncomfortable piece. Reform did not come easily. Entire sectors resisted oversight. Military commanders bristled at human advisory councils embedded within their operations. Economic blocs attempted to quietly recreate old exploitative practices under new terminology. And every time Elias noticed, he never shouted. He never threatened. He simply documented, presented correlations, demonstrated outcomes, quietly reminded them that humans remembered patterns far longer than most species remembered grudges. The concordance began to change, not out of fear, but out of exhaustion. It was easier to be fair than to be constantly exposed. Eloria found herself ruling differently as well. She listened longer, questioned assumptions, required impact projections, not just in resources, but in lives. For the first time since her ascension, she felt less like a ruler standing above an empire, and more like a guardian standing within it. 11. The day the human left. Elias Ward departed without announcement. No farewell speech. No final negotiation. Just a message left for Eloria in her private channel. You did what most civilizations can't. You chose to change before you were forced to.
Don't let them forget why.
She stood on the observation balcony again, watching the same scarred cutter lift into the sky. Only this time, her wings did not fold in fear. They spread in resolve. 12. What the throne learned. Decades passed. The concordance endured. It lost territory, but gained stability. It surrendered absolute authority, but gained legitimacy. It abandoned silent extermination and gained allies who stayed. Human delegates became commonplace. Human engineers indispensable. Human mediators quietly feared, but never again underestimated. And always, in the education chambers of Viral Prime, young heirs studied a single case more than any other. The Ward precedent. They were taught that the human had never fired a weapon, never seized a fleet, never issued an ultimatum. He had simply stepped aside and allowed the concordance to experience the full weight of its own design. 13. The Princess Queen's final record. Near the end of her reign, Eloria dictated a final entry for the royal continuum. It was sealed, restricted, intended only for those who would one day sit upon the throne. Her voice, aged but steady, echoed through the archive. We once believed power was measured by what we could impose. The human showed us it is measured by what others choose to uphold. He did not come to conquer us. He came to see whether we were worth cooperating with.
She paused.
That is the most dangerous question a civilization can be asked. 14. The legend beyond the concordance. Far beyond viral space, among human worlds and mixed species colonies, Elias Ward became something quieter than a hero. A reference point. A reminder that humans did not need to dominate to prevail. They only needed time, memory, and the willingness to let others face the consequences of ignoring them. Story spread, not as propaganda, but as warning. Do not mistake patience for weakness. Do not mistake cooperation for dependence. And never assume a human who is silent has stopped acting. 15. Why the warning endured. Long after Eloria's wings were laid to rest in crystal honor, long after the triarch system faded into historical caution, one phrase remained etched above the concordance throne. Not law, not decree. A reminder. The human was not like the others. Because humans did not need to be feared to be powerful. They only needed to be ignored once. And the galaxy had learned, painfully, permanently, that it would never make that mistake again.